Hi, welcome, and thanks for tuning in to Talk Spirit. I am your host, psychic medium Ginny. And on this week's episode, this one should be a really fun one for our zodiac and astrology enthusiasts. We are going to be talking about zodiac compatibilities and how the star signs affect and relate to our love lives. I have a special guest named Bethany coming on, and she is an astrological consult, a best-selling author, an intuitive relationship expert, and she specializes in love and location astrology. She also is helping people work with the Black Moon Lilith, which is helping people work with the witch wound. And we're going to ask her way more about that. She has been featured in Cosmopolitan, the Hollywood Times, People, and so many more places. So we are going to welcome Bethany on.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course, of course. So I have to tell you really fast. What's so funny is that you're an astrologer and our times align today, which is my actual birthday.
Happy birthday. Wow. Mine
Like,
was
I
actually
was
last week. So mine is April
okay,
5th.
so we're both Aries.
We are. Wow. That makes a
Oh,
lot of sense.
oh my God. Okay, so this is gonna be a fun episode.
Yes.
This is gonna be a fun episode. Okay. All right. I'm loving it already. Anyway,
Yes.
so the stars are already aligning, guys.
Yes.
um, so okay. With you having an expertise in astrology, and I also want to get into the location thing as well. You know
Mhm.
how we all are like, okay, well, I don't know if I can date that zodiac sign because we're not compatible. Is this a
Mhm.
real thing about zodiac signs being compatible with one another? And if they're incompatible, can those relationships actually work out?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Obviously, one I get a lot. And really, the answer is so the zodiac compatibility is called synastry. So you look at synastry charts, and there's a lot of layers to it, right? Like there's just so many levels to it. Um, so what we always kind of say is that the sun sign is a great place to start, but it's not where you want to end because again, there's so many aspects. So really, we have kind of our top three: our sun, moon, and rising signs. And the moon
Okay.
sign is actually the one that we look at a lot for emotions and our emotional needs. So that can actually play even more of a role in relationships sometimes than the sun sign. So sun sign we're
Okay.
looking at as kind of like life path, energetics, energy, just kind of how you move around in the world, maybe kind of what your motivations are. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, I mean that's where we start. We look at the sun signs and go from there, but it doesn't mean that you're necessarily 100% compatible or 100% not compatible based on that one element, right? There's so many different
Yeah.
layers that can kind of, even if the sun signs aren't the most compatible, they could have really compatible moon signs, or the rest of their chart could just line up really well. So it's definitely not the end game, but it's a great place to start.
Okay. I also hear a lot about our Venus signs have a lot to do with our love. And what is your outlook on the Venus signs when
Yes,
you're
that's
looking at the
actually the
chart?
next place I go. Yep, I do the top 3, and then I go right to the Venus sign because that really talks a lot about, our value, our self-worth even, our sense of luxury, our sense of relationships, kind of our even our sensual pleasures, anything kind of earthly, right? That's where the Venus placement's really gonna give us some clues, and you can really see relationship patterns there. You can see kind of how people move around in relationships, what their relationships sort of start looking like. You could have someone, for example, who had, their Venus might be in Aries. And so they have really passionate but kind of short love affairs. And so you kind of see it play out that way. And it's kind of their needs in a relationship also. You can kind of see what their kind of goals would be in creating a relationship.
It's funny that you said that. I think you were intuitively picking that up because my Venus is actually Aries.
Yeah.
And that was a pattern with like these little short-lived things. I feel like I've grown though. Like I've been in a
Mhm.
long-term relationship and I was married as well.
Mhm.
But in between those was exactly what you were saying. These little
Yeah.
short burst relationships, like very bored, very fast, like over
Yes.
it. Like that was me. That was me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have a lot of fire in my chart, so
That is a lot
um
of fire, yeah.
yeah, I have a Sagittarius moon and my Venus is
Nice.
Aries and then my sun sign is Aries, but my rising is Cancer. Yeah. So
Oh, okay. Yeah,
yeah,
so that would
yeah,
make sense that kind of as you go on in life, because our rising sign really kind of takes charge a little bit more as we grow. And so Cancer
yeah.
is a very loyal, kind of long-term maternal sign. So it would make sense that as you got older, your relationships might become a little bit different and might be a little bit more nurturing and long term.
Yeah, yeah. It's reflecting now. So yeah, makes
Yeah.
sense. um so basically the best thing to do is to get this full chart read and this can really tell you like so like you could you do like a couple like where you read both charts and you could see what their challenges would be and things like that. And could someone whose charts were incompatible, could they work through those incompatibilities, or would that just be too difficult?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on kind of what they're wanting to get out of it because, what we're looking at with charts is kind of that soul growth, that development, that elevation. That's really what, our kind of purposes are, right? So if you're looking at somebody who's asking, like, is this going to be the easiest relationship? That might be a challenge if that's what they're looking for. But if they're looking for something that's really going to help them grow and develop and they have kind of a difficult looking chart, then you can see a lot of areas where they could actually help each other grow and develop because of the differences, because of the obstacles. Um, but there are some charts that are just really tough and you're just kind of looking at them going like, I don't know how you two found each other, but it's going to be less of a comfortable road, I guess. But some people really like that growth and development within their relationships. They really use the relationship as a portal for transformation. And so, even if you see kind of a difficult, chart comparison, it's like these people might actually be really on board for that because there's a lot of growth in it. So, it kind of just depends on what the couple is looking for. If they're really looking for something simple and easy and, compatibility really is not a yes or no question. Like we all have areas that we can be compatible with, and we do have a lot of free will in our relationships. That's another thing I really talk to couples about is like you can kind of twist and bend and put yourself into this relationship and make it work, but is that how you want to do it? Is that what you want to do? So like, are you looking for something that's more naturally compatible, or are you looking at something like, well, we're already married, so now what? You know what I mean? Then it's like, okay, we're going to focus
Yeah.
more on like how to make this work versus like we've been casually dating for 3 months. What do you think about our chart? That might be a different conversation than somebody who has the difficult compatibility, but they're already married and they have kids. And it's like, okay, well, let's see what we can do here to make this, a more peaceful relationship for you and what energetics you can work with. And sometimes that perspective is really what does shift the compatibility for them. They can sort of respect like, oh, you're different. This is how you process emotions. Now that I know that,
Yeah.
it's okay. I know what to do with that now.
Yeah, that's something I'll see in reading sometimes is I'll see a couple, like a girl will come to me and her and him are just totally misunderstanding each other. Like
Yeah.
he's feeling defensive toward her or she's feeling defensive toward him and they're internalizing things that they're saying or doing or the way they're loving each other. I think that's also where the love languages come into play as well.
Mhm.
Because I will notice that in reading in my own, psychic readings where someone comes to me, and it may be something you see as well, I'm pretty sure, is as just people not understanding each other and the way that they deal with certain things, or the way that they want to be loved, or you know they'll think the person, like, they'll be like, I feel like he doesn't love me because he doesn't do this, and but in my reading I'm picking up something totally different. I'm like, no, I don't see that. Like, I but and I feel like they think I'm wrong, and I'm like, I think you guys are misunderstanding each other. Like,
Yeah.
that's what I feel.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
um, I there's so many questions I had people telling me. Oh, I wanted to ask you about the location astrology. Like, how
Yeah.
does that come into play? And does that come into play with our love? Can we be living in the wrong place?
Yes,
That can
absolutely.
affect love. Like, can that be a thing?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So we call it, it's called astrocartography, and it's something that really can help us figure out where our best locations are for love, prosperity, learning, transformation. Um, and so you do have something, we all have something called a Venus line. And so along that is where you're going to find more of a relationship, um, kind of vibe, I guess. And if you think about kind of just in your own lives, or especially people who've moved a lot, you can kind of feel like, maybe the place that you went to college in, you're like, yeah, I learned a lot, but like I didn't really have any relationships or nothing very serious. And then there's, maybe the time you spent the summer on this beach, and it was just like you didn't really learn a lot, but you had a lot of fun and had a lot of like great relationships, and everything really flowed and felt super easy. And so we kind of naturally gravitate. It's almost like we have a little bit of a soul blueprint that's telling us kind of where we need to go for what. But sometimes we kind of stay in a place too long, or we're just ready to transform into something else, and we're still kind of stuck in this one place. And so even just visiting something along that line can help open that up for us. Or it's also fun too, because with things like the Venus line, you might not even have to go there. It could be somebody that is from there. It could be somebody who lives there and then you end up moving there. It could be something like that. So you can feel the Venus line
Wow.
effects even without actually living there. And what's so cool about, astrocartography, like, of course, there's, translation and there's interpretation, just like any astrology chart. But what's kind of cool about it is that, when you pull the chart up, they're very distinct lines. So almost every time people are
Okay.
like, oh my gosh, I'm living like 5 miles from that line. Like, how did you do that? I'm like, I don't do it. I just type it in. And this is like, the same way you make a chart. Like, this
Wow.
is, I don't draw this like based on where you're living. Like, this is what's being reflected back to you. So people just, I mean, it's
Yeah.
amazing because they're like, oh my God, I went to school on that line, or like, that's where my husband is from, or that's where we met, or like, and it's always like so close to a line. And so I think that's a really cool way for people to see kind of the effects of astrology in their lives too, because it's just very defined and kind of like, in your face in a way. Because when you pull up, an astrology chart, people are like, I don't know what that means. Like, I have, you could be just making it up and they wouldn't know the difference really. But with, an
Yeah.
astrocartography map, it's so cool for them because they get to see what you're seeing. So like you're interpreting what the lines mean, and where they cross, and there's a lot to it. There's a lot of layers to it, but it is something really cool for clients too. They always get really excited because they're like, oh my gosh, I live near that, or like that's where I went to school, or like I've always wanted to visit
Wow.
that place, or whatever. And there's just a very distinct line right over that city, or right near it, and so they get really excited about that.
I definitely need to look into that for myself. I would be very interested to see because I have moved, and um you know, as a child, I kind of told everyone I was going to move here to California. And
Mhm.
later on in life, I ended up here. So, and my first marriage started in one state and
Mhm.
ended in this state. Um, so,
Wow.
uh, Yeah. So it's very interesting that you talk about that. What about if you have two people that are from two different cities, but they meet in a in a city that's opposite from their cities? So like me and my partner, we're both from two completely different places.
Mhm.
But we both ended up in, the LA area. So it's like, could that be? Could like our, people's Venuses be like, oh, they ended up in a city, or was they supposed to both end up in that city? Like, or could their Venuses have been like if they were from New York or wherever, like
Mhm.
it kind of counteract. You get what I'm saying? Because think
Yeah.
about it, like in LA, there's so many transplants, right? So like a lot of
Mhm.
us are transplants, and I mean, I've been here like 17, well, oh gosh, almost 17 years. It's been a while.
Mhm.
So think about that. Like, how does that come into play with so many people moving to different cities?
Yeah, well, because you might not, so there are areas on your chart that are just neutral, that there isn't a line, and so it's not really a lot of influence one way or the other. Um,
Yeah.
so where you're born doesn't necessarily, you might not even be born near one of your lines necessarily. You could be born in kind of a
Okay.
neutral area. And then you could both share a line. For example, maybe you both have a Venus line going through California, or it could be a Jupiter line, something that would attract you there. But
Yeah.
with, you know, even like a divorce line, you could have, something like a Saturn line there, or Mars, that's really like you're going to learn this lesson and then you're going to separate. So it could almost be, again, because with astrology, as humans, we were like, oh, well, then why wouldn't I just pick to live along all these good lines? Like, why would I ever want to live, you know, near something hard? But kind of like,
Yeah.
again, if you're looking at it from that higher perspective of like, you might choose to go somewhere kind of on this, internal level, because you're like, oh, well, this is what I want to learn, or this is what I want to develop, or this is what I want to do. And so you could
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
move to that area without necessarily knowing that's the plan. And then, so a lot of transplants can go to LA maybe because they have a sun line there, or they have, just something that's kind of pulling them or calling them. But it could even just be for a lesson. It could just be that's the way they want to learn something about themselves. And so,
Yeah.
that's always the funny thing too. When I have pulled someone up and they're living very close to a very difficult line, they're like, but I don't understand, like, why would I navigate to this? And it's like, well, what we perceive as humans as like difficult, on like a higher level, a soul level, or whatever, you're looking at it as like, oh, this is great. I'm going to learn like so much from this, or like I'm going to develop this amazing like skill or strength, or, the same way that you might look at like, somebody in medical school and their day to day is just super hard. And you're like, why would you ever do that? And they're like, because I want to be a doctor. So, like, this is what I have to do, and that's kind of that
Yeah.
higher viewpoint, like that bird's eye view of like, you know, if you're in college and you're just studying all the time, if somebody just took a snapshot of that, you're like, yeah, this is really hard. And they would be like, well, why would you ever choose that? And you're like, well, because I want to do this other thing. And so I have to go through these lessons to get to this level. And then it makes a lot more sense. And so I feel like from that perspective, astrocartography makes a lot more sense. Because even, people are like, well, why wouldn't I just go to my Venus line? And it's like, your Venus sign is lovely, right? Luxury, rose colored glasses, relationships. But,
Mhm.
along that line, what is your motivation for anything, right? You're just going to enjoy that, which sometimes you want to do. And then sometimes you want to take your life to the next level. But you would that's kind of the warning sign that they give around the Venus line, is like, you can get very spiritually lazy because you don't have any motivator. Like, if your life is going pretty well, we're not that motivated to change, right? Like, it's usually when things are a
Yeah.
little rocky, or things are, moving a lot, that you're really motivated to do that work and that study and try to elevate yourself. But if everything's going kind of exactly the way you want, and you're like, this is great, I'm not going to change anything. Like, I don't need to like figure this out. Like, I've got it. And so that's kind of what they say, that, that internal whatever that's pulling us somewhere, there's reasons that maybe in the close up day to day we don't quite get. If we look back on that bigger perspective, we're like, oh, I see maybe why I spent some time along that difficult line, or why we might have both been drawn to that area, even though it, ended our relationship, or it made us fight, or whatever it is. It's like, oh, but actually what came out of that was something strong.
Yeah. Yeah, I can completely relate 100%. Because yeah, I feel like I was supposed to change my perspective of a lot of things, which led me to being on here with you right now.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
you know what I mean? So it took
Yeah.
these terrible lessons that I had to learn to
Mhm.
push me into my purpose. So, to doing my business, to doing what I was supposed to do. And yeah, so I completely understand. And I can look at that from a higher perspective instead of like, oh, why did this happen to me? Like, I know
Mhm.
why that happened to me. It had to happen. So, yeah, absolutely. That's great. So, yeah, if I get it 100%, I never would have went down this path had everything just been beautiful, right? I
Exactly.
would still
Yeah.
I would still be my old me, I guess you would say.
Mhm.
So, yeah,
Yeah, and
instead of
it's
a
still
better version
hard,
of
of
myself.
course. Yeah, and even, like, people in medical school, for example, like, there are days where they're like, "Why am I doing this?" And they know, like, they have the reason at the end, and so imagine what we're going
Right.
through when we have no idea maybe what the final destination looks like, and we're going through these really tough lessons, and we're like, "I don't wanna do this." Like, I don't know why I'm, like, going through this. Why is this happening to me? So it's just kind of like giving ourselves that grace while we're going through it too, of like, I don't always know the end, but I'm gonna try to keep the faith as much as possible that this is some, version of a lesson or something that's gonna really help me get to the next level.
Absolutely. Like I said, I can totally relate, like, because there's been a lot of lessons that I had to learn. So, I'm like, okay. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, it all makes sense now. Like, so
Yeah.
um another question is, how can we use astrology to help our relationships, or to help us even finding a good relationship? How could we use that to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first stop is how much self-knowledge it really gives us. And you know, having even your individual chart read, that's how I like to run my synastry, is like I read everybody's chart one on one, and then we do the combined chart reading. Um, because I feel like that self insight really helps with you learning how to relate to other people, and kind of what your own patterns and habits and communication styles are. And then learning kind of about the other persons as well. And then how do those fit together? Where can we compromise? Where do you not want to compromise? Where is it just kind of your inherent nature? Where is it something you can kind of work on? Um,
Hmm.
like for us as Aries, like we are fire signs, we're leaders. We're always gonna have that inherent nature, that drive to kind of initiate and create change. And we're always gonna have a bit of a fire to us, right? Like we're always gonna have a little bit of
Yeah.
that going on. And there are places that we can kind of improve our communication, because the big thing with us is we can be quite blunt. We can be very like tunnel vision of like, this is my goal, this is my dream, you're in my way. Like we can definitely like work on things. We're also never gonna
I've
be.
actually been doing that. I've been doing that. I'm not. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are things that we can work on, and especially when we're in a relationship. But at the end of the day, we're never going to be, full on Libra. We're never going to be a Taurus. We're never going to be whatever. We're not going to be different than our inherent nature. There are things that are ours to work on. And each each sign has its own lessons to learn, right? But
Of
then we
course.
also can really stand strong and like we're fiery, we're intense, we're leaders. This is who we are. This is what we do. This is how we show up. And this is how we create fulfillment for ourselves. And so we need partners
Mhm.
that can meet us there. So that's kind of the first piece. But as Aries kind of struggle in relationships with communication, that's an area that we can also look at and really work on as far as what does our partner need. If we are with a Libra partner, they're going to really require a lot less fiery communication than what is maybe our natural go-to, or like how we interact with other Aries. So that's something we can
Yeah.
kind of learn and compromise, but we're never going to be full on something different, right? Like we're always going to have our basic
Yeah.
nature because that's what we're choosing to work on in this lifetime, or whatever you believe. But we're choosing these types of lessons. We're choosing this energetic for specific reasons. It's helping us on our path. So we can't just get rid of that. We can't just shove that to the side for the sake of a relationship. But we also want to find that compromise of, a Libra partner is maybe not going to be able to handle all that fire coming at them. So with them, we might try to put a little bit of a filter on how we communicate, or we might be like, you know what, I'm just like out of 10 right now. Let's like take a minute, we'll come back and then we'll try this again when
Yeah.
I've worked through some, like, let me go to the gym for a minute and then we'll have this conversation again. And those are things
Yeah.
that we can kind of find and meet in the middle on. But I think the self-awareness is really that first step of like, what is it that you need? What is the astrology helping you to understand? Because I think too, it really takes the blame and the shame out of relationships, because if you're looking at like,
Okay.
two people kind of butting heads, you could have the Aries being like, well, you're not assertive enough, and the Libra being like, well, you're too fiery. And it's like, no, this is like everybody's nature. Like that's
Yeah.
okay. Like
Yeah.
nobody's right, nobody's wrong. There's just areas that we can do a little better and communicate a little bit differently and find that compromise. But that's,
Yeah.
I mean, that's every relationship, right? Like every relationship, you're learning about each other as you go. Every relationship, you're like, huh, okay, this is like the way this person loads the dishwasher. Like, I don't know. You just kind of learn tons of little things as you go
Right. Right.
and you
Yeah.
work
There's always going
around
to
that.
be
And
things. Yeah.
there's always going to be things.
Yeah.
And I think astrology just gives
Yeah.
us that blueprint and gives us, just kind of that map of like what is really going to be important to me and what am I really going to be compatible with, and like what do I want and what am I not willing to compromise on. And I think again, for especially some of like the fiery signs, I think that's huge for us to be able to kind of own those natures.
Yeah.
And for some of the signs that get the bad raps, like like Gemini always gets a bad rap. And for them
Yeah.
to own like, this is how I operate. I'm supposed to move fast. I'm supposed to like be very magnetic and have a lot of balls in the air, and have a lot of businesses or whatever.
Hmm.
And for them to just kind of acknowledge like, this is my nature, and to find somebody that meets them at that level. Not that they have to be exactly the same, but that is okay with living their lives that way. But that's why Gemini, and let's say like Capricorn kind of have a hard time with each other, because Capricorn is like very 9 to 5 job life. They love that kind of structure. That's like
Hmm.
Gemini's least favorite place. And so can they
Yeah.
appreciate that about each other, or are they gonna come at each other of, well, you're responsible, you're not in a 9 to 5. Well, you're boring because you are in a 9 to 5. Like this is fine. This is how
Yeah.
everyone, operates. But are you okay with your partner doing this, or is this not something you want in your lifestyle? Like, are you not willing to compromise whatever it is?
Yeah. Well, I am in a house, like my son is a Sagittarius, my partner is a Sagittarius, and I'm an Aries.
Yeah.
So this is a blazing
Fiery
fire
house.
house. It gets little intense sometimes, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, so sometimes it's a little too much energy, but I think I get what you were talking about with the Capricorns, because my first, with my first marriage, it was with a Capricorn, and it was a very
Uh,
difficult
there's some
situation
head
for
butting
me.
signs. Yeah, those are that's a tough
Yeah,
pairing. Yeah.
It really is. And, I even grew up with a Capricorn father. So,
Yes,
we
I had a
don't
Capricorn
see
mother.
eye to eye either. Huh?
I
You
have
had
a
a
Capricorn
Capricorn
mother.
mother?
Mhm.
Okay, okay. I mean, the women, like, I love them. I can be friends with them, no problem. Like, I love their energy. Like, they're amazing, like, people. They're all about business. They're very motivated people. But I know as a relationship, it was very difficult. And so I can see how astrology comes into play when it comes to relationships, because when I look back on certain relationships or certain situations, I'm like, I see it now. I kind of see that, we weren't the
Yeah.
best match. Like we were, yeah. So, and I know the Capricorn, like still holds these grudges for like things I've said or whatever, and I'm
Oh,
just
yeah,
like,
that's a big one for
we're
them.
so like in the heat of the moment, and especially the
Yeah.
young version of me was very mouthy and like didn't care. Now I'm like older, and I have empathy for people, and I try to watch how I react and say things, because even if it's the heat of the moment. So it's kind of like a learning process, like I said, but I'm just like, dude, this was like 15 years ago. Like, why are you still holding, like it's just little
They do
things.
that.
So
They
like,
do that. Yeah, actually, forgiveness is one of their really big lessons that Capricorns usually come to learn, but it takes them a
they
while
need
because
to
it's
learn
very,
forgiveness. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's one
Well,
of
he hasn't.
their bingo card items usually.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a tough one for them
Yeah.
because it's one of their main lessons, so it takes them a
But
while
they're
usually.
always attracted to me. They've always been attracted to me, which is so weird. And I'm just like, this is not going to probably work. Like, and I tell them that, and they're just like, oh no, I think it will. And I'm just like, maybe, but when it comes down to it, I just, it's a difficult one for sure.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. It's a lot of
yeah.
power struggles. Yeah.
Power struggle, you said?
Yeah, yeah, they're headbutters. There's a lot of power struggle with that because they both kind of like to call the shots and be the leader, which is kind of what would attract them to each other if they like kind of these strong personalities. They're both very motivated signs. They're both very loyal signs. So they have like a lot in common in some ways, but um really just the way they want to live their lives, and they think they're right too. That's the thing. They're both very convinced that their way is like the correct way. So it really can create that power struggle. And then again, exactly that dynamic that you just said, where Aries kind of fires off and they don't really think much of it. And then the Capricorn, like 5 years later, is like, remember that time you said this? And you're like, no, I actually don't remember that at all. But the Capricorns do. They have
Right.
it. They have it on a list somewhere. Like they're just very
It's
like,
kinda like we're over it, like, we're over it a few minutes later, we're just like,
we're over it a few
whatever,
minutes
we're
later,
fine,
and
like,
they
we
are,
forgive you, like, whatever.
yeah,
I don't feel like I hold grudges like that, so, yeah, never been a grudge
yeah.
holder like that. It has to be something, like, really bad, so,
Yeah,
yeah,
compassion and forgiveness are two big things on their bingo card, because they
yeah,
usually come in with
yeah,
a lot of kind of like that judgment and that like grudge holding. And so learning how to be able to kind of forgive and find that compassion for other people, that's usually something that takes them a while to kind of realize and get in the flow of and learn how to do. So they spend a lot of time
yeah,
kind of in the shadow of that because they're also one of the signs again that are very convinced that they've like got it figured out, so they're not usually the ones like lining up for therapy or like self-awareness or self-help. Like they're kind of like, no, I've got this figured out, like I don't need any of that. And so it sometimes takes them a little bit longer to actually start learning those lessons of compassion and forgiveness because they're not always that interested in doing that kind of work. Whereas, like the Scorpio is all about transformation and shadow work, and they love that. So they're like usually,
yeah,
digging into the subconscious all the time. Whereas Capricorn is like, no, like I've got, and these are very generalized. Obviously, every sign is different, and every person within a sign doesn't always fall in this. But
yeah,
Capricorns are usually very good in kind of the earth plane development. So they're, usually like bosses. They're usually like, they can be really great CEOs, like, of companies and in these kind of like 9 to 5 jobs. So they're really good at creating like an earth environment, if that makes sense. Like, they're really good at like,
Yeah, like stability
yeah,
and like
yeah,
stable. Yeah.
yeah. So they're not
Yeah.
always the ones that feel that because they meet kind of these external check boxes, right? Like, they're like, I have a good job,
Mhm.
I have a good home, I'm married, I'm fine. I don't need anything. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? Like, I'm not the problem, I guess. And they're
Mm,
usually kind
yeah.
of the that then they have to, really recognize like, oh, I checked a lot of these external boxes, but I missed the mark on some of the internal, or like I have all these things, but like my family's not in a good place, or like I don't have a relationship with my kids, or like, whatever it is, they just kind of
Yeah.
can sort of miss that internal stuff. Whereas some of the other signs, like a
Yeah.
Pisces, might be really spiritual and really self-aware, but then they struggle with the external. They struggle with like navigating the earth plane as far as like money and homes and finances. They're like, oh, that's so boring. Like, why do I have to do that? So
Yeah.
like each sign has
Yeah.
its own
Yeah.
area that it's got to work on, and places that they struggle, and that just happens to be kind of the Capricorn Aries like fight.
Wow. Yeah. Now looking back, it makes so much sense. Like it really
It
does when
always
you think
does.
about it. So,
Yes.
oh, but um yeah, because I feel like now, like, I'm with the Sagittarius and we've been together for a while. And although it's been like challenging at times because he was very close-minded when we first met, I would say. I feel like though he has been one of those biggest cheerleaders, like you would say, for me, like very pushing me to do what I do and pushing, like coming up with these great ideas. Matter of fact, he's the reason I'm on here talking to you because he was the one like, oh, you should do the podcast. You blah blah blah, like very pushy, like you should do
Mhm.
this, like don't say you can't, like and
Yeah.
I feel like as an Aries I thrive off that. So yeah.
Yeah, that initiation, that fire, that passion. Yeah, that's like all very good Sagittarius areas for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So but they have their bad as well. So, just like every sign. So
Just
yeah.
like every sign. Yeah, that's
So the next thing yeah, yeah. I mean, even our sign, even Aries,
oh,
so
Aries gets a really bad, yeah, it gets a really bad rep as
hello.
having like a lot of work.
Oh, yeah, yeah, we do get a bad rep. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the next thing I wanted to talk about, because you were mentioned the Black Moon Lilith witch wound, which I am very witchy. I'm into all of that, manifesting, occult, all of that. So I love it, love it, love it. I just wanted to ask, like, what is this witch wound that you talk about? And, can you explain this? Like, how do we, like, what is healing the witch wound? Like, where does the witch wound come from?
Yeah, so it's really based, it kind of depends, I guess, on what people believe. I really see it as kind of perceived as a past life sort of issue that follows us into this one, but we also have it a lot in this life if past lives aren't your bag. We also can see it present really easily in how our society is today, right? Because you know, the intuitive gifts. There's all kinds of things about women, especially, that really get exiled. That are we're told like, this isn't logical. Don't do this. This is too much. This is too this or too that. And so we're really taught a lot to kind of exile these pieces of ourselves. So that's sort of the witch wound. When you're talking about a past life, think of all of the incarnations that a female would have been killed for using these intuitive gifts, right? Like a psychic,
Yeah.
in the 1800s, like, you're gonna get burned at the stake. Like, you just
Yeah.
are. Like, and so even just
Mhm.
through like epigenetics or whatever it is they believe, like, these things carry with us through the lineage or through our past lives or through even just coming into this world. These are we're definitely in a time where a lot of this can be healed because a lot of people are able to make a living from these types of gifts where, you and I are having this podcast and no one's like threatening to kill us. Like we're talking about very
Right.
occult type things. And so the witch wound is really kind of that wound of the pieces of ourselves that we've exiled because we're very afraid to really like access these gifts, to let them be known, to be seen for them. And so the Black Moon Lilith is a placement in the chart that is really the Lilith archetype, which is the mythology of that is that she was Adam's first wife and she refused to submit. And so she was cast out of the garden and then they created Eve. So she's really that like empowered feminine, dark feminine, really sexually empowered, really strong, really powerful, really aggressive. That's kind of her embodiment in the mythology. And so where you find that in the chart is going to be kind of the area that is where we're hiding, where we're afraid, where we're exiled. So depending on where that is, like it could be like mine's in Leo, which is a lot about actually being seen for the gifts and being recognized, being a leader in that arena. And so healing that could look like pretty much what I'm doing here, right? Like where I'm being seen, where I'm being out there about what I do and who I am and the gifts and all of that. That's kind of how you heal it is you figure out where it is and you work with it and you own it and you try to figure out kind of what it's stemming from. And then you can really, train your brain, retrain some of this to recognize like, okay, I'm not living in this time frame, or I'm doing this podcast and nothing bad happened. Like, in fact, good things usually happen from these things, because we're helping people or we're getting clients or we're doing whatever. And so as we're owning that wound and transforming it, we're actually really stepping into who we're meant to be and our gifts. And we're using that wound, we're owning it, we're transforming it, and we're putting it out, sharing it, and doing good for ourselves and doing good for others. And so the Black Moon placement in a chart can really give us the key, that blueprint of like, okay, why am I holding myself back, or where am I self-sabotaging, or what is the fear that's driving some of this behavior? And you see that a lot in the spiritual community, like spiritual entrepreneurs, or they'll hit an income ceiling or a social media follower ceiling, or they don't really want to like call themselves this. So they kind of use different wording, but the other wording isn't actually resonating with the people that they need it to. So that's kind of where I get a lot of people asking like, why is this happening? And it's like, well, let's look where your Black Moon Lilith is, because she's probably hanging out in the area that needs the most attention and the most kind of transformation.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that is amazing. I'm definitely going to have to look into that as well. I love that. It's about basically finding like kind of the key to who you are and like what's
Yeah.
holding you back as a person from kind of manifesting what you truly want, like because you're not showing up as who you really are. So,
Yeah.
that makes a lot
And
of
it can
sense. I love
be,
that. I love that.
yeah. And it can be kind of the hidden gifts too. Like if you have kind of Black Moon Lilith in the sign of Pisces, that's generally the sign of the psychic. So it could be even just like gifts that people haven't accessed. Like it could be that they've completely exiled those gifts like just off. They don't even know that they have those abilities anymore because they've spent their lives kind of smushing it down and not listening to it. And
Wow.
so you can actually find like people's hidden gifts within their chart as well. And you can see kind of the flip side of things too. Like, like if a Black Moon's in Leo, it could also, usually that's a lot about not wanting to be seen, but that can also be that they have that gift of sight. You know what I mean? Where they're able to like make predictions, make
Yeah.
prophecies, things like that, and lead people into, kind of a new paradigm, but they're so scared of doing that because of whatever has happened. And then it kind of depends on what, house placement it's in as well. But just generally, it's such a great way to get a good start of like, what is it that you're so scared of that's holding you back? And really like seeing the ways that we self-sabotage because we think it's what's going to keep us safe. And if we can actually get to the root of that, then all of these kind of layers of self-sabotage can start peeling away very quickly.
That makes so much sense. That really, really does. Wow. Okay, so I did put your website www.bethanynicole.com. This is where people can find you to book sessions with you to get their charts done. For the Black Moon thing, you are starting something with that, correct? So if they want to work with this and everything, they can come. They just go to the website. Is that all they do?
Yeah, they can go to the website. And so I have kind of a Black Moon Lilith freebie guide. It's just kind of a little cheat sheet about if your Black Moon is in this sign, what that could mean for you. And that's kind of the incentive for signing up for my email list, which is an amazing opportunity because you get the monthly love horoscope also delivered.
Oh,
So that
cool.
guide just gives you kind of a quick little blueprint. And then I do have Own Your Witch Wound sessions, which are pretty exclusively, we're looking at your chart for the Black Moon, we're looking for your Chiron, we're looking for kind of hidden gifts or what's holding you back or anything that you feel and that might have ended up in the exiled Lilith territory. We'll kind of track it down and see if we can't transform it.
Okay. And so they can visit bethanynicole.com to find all of your services. So you
All
guys
of that.
definitely need to go check that out. And you can share like any of your socials. What would be like Instagram? They could follow you. And is it just at Bethany Nicole? Like,
Yeah, it's at Bethany Nicole Love. And that's the
oh,
Instagram.
at
And
Bethany
all of the
Nicole
links
Love.
are on that too. Yeah. And you can book sessions right
Okay.
from
Okay.
the Instagram. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Amazing. Amazing. I love that. I want to thank you so, so much for coming on here today. I'm telling you, I swear the stars like literally aligned us. Like, what is the likelihood that like we're the same sign? Today is my birthday, and I have an astrologer on. Like, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
uh,
Who just
I
had
don't
her
know
birthday
what
too.
more.
So it's like wild.
Huh? Do what?
Who just had my birthday as well. So yeah, this is wild.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's so crazy. Like it's just wild, yeah. So yeah, I don't know. It was totally meant to be, but thank you so much. And you know, I really think anyone who is interested in the charts being done, definitely go to her. These things really, and it's not just about love either. This is about career. Like you can find out so much about yourself by getting your chart read. Like it's insane. It's so deep. Like it's so much more than a psychic reading. Although I do psychic readings, it's so much more. It can really tell you so much about yourself, like what you're supposed to be doing. And yeah, even like where to find your husband, and like it goes so deep.
It does. It
But
does.
thank you. I really, really want to thank you again for coming on. And
Yeah.
again, it is BethanyNicole.com. You guys go check her out. And I want to just say thank you guys so much for tuning in to Talk Spirit. Until next time, thank you. Bye bye. Thank you guys so, so much for tuning in to Talk Spirit. This was an amazing episode with Bethany. And until next time.